The debate on the radical Greens abortion bill has now made its way to the New South Wales lower house. There was a lot of the familiar drivel that we've come to expect from pro-abortion MPs and a predictably familiar routine by one particular pro-abortion Labor MP, Julia Finn, that you're going to hear about. And that's today on The Dr. Jo Show. So before we get into the meat of today's episode, I wanted to ask you guys to subscribe if you're not already a subscriber on this channel. The more people that subscribe, the bigger our channel grows and we can reach more people. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind day. It started with Labor hiding from the notice paper, from the people, because that's their way they communicate what's going on in Parliament. They actually hid from everybody, including the Liberals, that they were going to put this bill, the Greens abortion bill, up for debate today. So at the start of the day, they published a notice paper, said what they were going to be doing. They didn't say anything about this bill. And I think that's partly because they didn't want people to come into the gallery. They didn't want pro-life libs and others to be preparing speeches. They wanted to be able to dominate the agenda. And so right up until mid-morning, the Liberals had no idea that this bill was going to be up for debate. And it's only because of Labor sources who told us covertly that Labor was planning to suspend standing orders at 2:30 and to ram this bill through by giving it government time. So I want to be really clear about that, because one of the first things that happened in this debate once it kicked off at 2:30 is that Labor MPs such as Ryan Park, the Minister for Health, were at pains to talk about how this isn't government legislation. This was then followed up by Jodie Harrison, the Minister for Women for Labor, who was then at pains to say, look, I might be the Minister for Women, but I'm not speaking in that official capacity because this is a private member's bill from the Greens and it's not a government bill. All of that seemed really hollow, if I'm going to be honest with you guys, because the way that this has worked out is that Chris Minns and Labor said throughout the election campaign, this is not a government bill. We're not supporting it. We're not giving it any government time for debate. And what that would have meant, given that private members' bills only get 1 hour a week, it would have meant that this bill continued to be debated all the way through this year and potentially even into next year, because there would have been that much debate on it, lots of speeches, lots of amendments. Instead, what Labor has done the minute Albo won the election is this dirty deal with the Greens, ramming through the bill in less than a fortnight. And so when Ryan Park gets up and says, oh, it's not a government bill, it really just seems like a gaslight, because it's very clear that Labor has prioritised this bill over and above all government business. The other thing that gave it away in the speech of Ryan Park is just how much he congratulates and thanks his good pal Amanda Conn in the Greens. In fact, he talks at length about how collaborative she's been, how she's worked with him in developing the provisions of this bill. And so right there and then you can just see it exposed, clear as night follows day, that this isn't some private thought bubble of the extremist pro-abortion Greens. It is very much pro-abortion MPs in the Labor Party working with the Greens to further their agenda. They know they can't do it through the Labor Party, so they're using the Greens to do it. And as much as Chris Minns went around saying, we're not supporting this bill, it's not going to get through, the reality is it's going to get through on Labor votes this week. The second key takeaway from the debate that's just happened is that all of the pro-abortion MPs who spoke in favour of this radical bill, they basically labelled anybody, and especially myself, but anybody that critiqued the bill as misinformation. So they were just at pains. Time and time again, we heard these words, misinformation and disinformation, used as weapons against anyone that said anything critical of the bill. And so I really feel like that's a very important thing to be aware of from our perspective, that if you're going to stand up for the babies, for their mothers to get genuine support, if you're going to criticise the pro-abortion establishment's agenda, you are just going to get labelled as misinformation and disinformation. And there were many kind of barbs thrown my way in particular, most of them veiled, but we're going to get to Julia Finn's ridiculous speech in a minute, where she does actually just target me in it, in this kind of insane rant. But I think you guys know this kind of dance pretty well by now. When the radical left says misinformation or disinformation, it's almost like some kind of Tourette's that they've got, where they hear an opinion or a question or a criticism from someone that just doesn't like their agenda and dares say something, and then they're just like misinformation, disinformation. Like that's just like their verbal diarrhea. They just have no other way of kind of responding to it, and so that's what they do. Point number 3, repeatedly in the speeches, this myth of abortion access was raised. It started off at the beginning with Jenny Leong from the Greens talking about how, there were these sob stories in the SMH and the Guardian and the ABC from women, although let's remember it was always just one woman in each article. It was never women en masse. But, some brave woman who went to a public hospital in Orange or Queanbeyan and was turned away from accessing an abortion. That is the basis for which this bill, this really radical Greens bill, has been argued for. And what I've said time and time again to you guys is this is an entirely fabricated basis. This is pro-abortion journalists working with pro-abortion MPs to construct a fake narrative that we have a crisis of abortion access in this country. If anything, we have a maternity crisis in this country with governments, Labor governments in Queensland and the New South Wales closing down maternity wards so that women are literally giving birth on the side of the road in Queensland. We've got those stories, and a woman who had to hold her miscarried baby because she couldn't access maternity care. That's the crisis, not this fake abortion access crisis. But what we saw time and time again in the speeches was just the repetition of this and the weaponization of a single story that is given a mouthpiece and a huge audience because of the connection that pro-abortion MPs have with pro-abortion media. And this is a campaign that's been waged by the media. And this is how they wage their war. We've had 37 articles from The Guardian in just the last few years about this abortion access crisis, about it being a postcode lottery. 51 from the taxpayer-funded ABC and 15 from the 9 newspapers. This shows us clearly that there's a war being waged through the left-wing media establishment, supported by politicians. And the whole narrative is that abortion is a postcode lottery in New South Wales, when in reality, in every postcode across this country, you can access a taxpayer-funded abortion for as little as $6.80, and you can do it via Zoom, via a telehealth abortion. We don't need to force nurses and midwives to become people that kill babies. We don't need to massacre this profession where, women went into because they care and want to birth babies. We don't need to subvert that completely and turn them into people that kill babies. But the Greens want to do that with the help of Labor because this is ideological. It's not about access. It's about transforming abortion as a moral question so that it's no longer a moral question, so that you and I can't dare ask a question about it because abortion is healthcare. And while I'm on that point, the fourth takeaway from the debate is just the bastardisation of the English language. Every pro-abortion MP got up in the parliament and just completely violated the English language, talking about abortion care, abortion healthcare, reproductive rights activists and fighters, reproductive justice. I mean, this is just antithetical to what they're actually talking about. I mean, abortion, which brutally kills a human being, cannot be used with the word care right after it. They're just completely mutually exclusive. Reproductive justice cannot involve trampling over the human rights of the most vulnerable cohort. It just made no sense. And, this was typified by Jenny Leong, who the Greens MP who kicked off the debate. And she said, oh, look, I'm speaking for the women of New South Wales. And there were lots of MPs who pretended to speak for the women of New South Wales. It was insane. None of them referenced the thousands of women that came to our rally last week and who clearly don't want this bill. But Jenny Leong finished off her speech by talking about her abortion when she was 20. And she talked about her abortion in that place as a woman of power and privilege with a voice, never mind her child who never got to live, who never gets to speak. And like every genocide in human history, it's the marginalised, voiceless group that doesn't get to speak about the complete annihilation of their human rights. And that was typified by Jenny Leong, but no doubt she'll be lauded in the pro-abortion media as being a warrior for women. And while we're on the subject, let's just think about why they bastardise the English language in this way. Because we don't refer to knee surgery healthcare or chemotherapy healthcare, because you just don't need to refer to a medical procedure that seeks to heal and restore a patient. You don't need to use the word healthcare after it because it's just so obvious that it's healthcare. The only reason they do it in the case of abortion, and the ABC Style Guide says you can't just talk about abortion, you have to always refer to it as abortion care. The reason they do this is because they want to brainwash all of us, because they just think we're so stupid that we can't see that what they're doing. And so the wash up at the debate is there were 14 speeches, the vast majority of whom were pro-abortion. And it is very clear that there is a deal that's been done by Labor and the Greens and some of the lefty Liberals who are pushing this through into law. And short of a miracle, that's probably where we're going to end up by the end of this week. But I'm going to keep you guys tuned. And you never know. A debate is never done until that final vote. So I'm really encouraging people to call and email MPs. Very important that we do that. And now, just to finish on a lighter note, is the bizarre speech of Julia Finn. Now we're getting pretty used to this very predictable routine of pro-abortion MPs who, because they just can't handle my style of campaigning, the fact that I want to ask them questions, hold them to account, I go to their electorates and we letterbox and make some noise, they just can't handle democracy. And so what they do is, instead of saying it to my face in the real world, they get up in Parliament where they have parliamentary privilege and they actually can't get sued for defamation. They've got this artificial protection where literally the ordinary person, you and me, we can do nothing about the fact that they say the most ridiculous accusations because of parliamentary privilege. Let's take a watch.
However, some of the campaign tactics engaged have amounted to bullying and spreading misinformation and disinformation, not lobbying. The behaviour of Dr. Joanna Howe in particular has been dreadful. Dr. Joanna is a social media influencer campaigning against abortions. Most of her content, however, is misleading and her tactics are bizarre and nasty. I cannot make this clearer. Her obnoxious attention-seeking behaviour does not influence me, and I doubt it influences any of my colleagues. Instead of seeking meetings and presenting a rational argument based on facts, Dr. Joanna organised a tour of Labor MPs' electorate offices to arrange protests against a Greens bill. When she visited my office, I knew she was coming, but I was at a meeting in the city, so I instructed my staff not to close the office, but to call the police if anything got out of hand. About 25 people showed up, and quite amusingly, one of my regular constituents left the office to see them there and started arguing with the protesters. After the uneventful protest ended, Dr. Joanna then entered my office and spoke to my senior electorate officer, who was heavily pregnant, on her last day of work before maternity leave. Someone else snuck in behind Joanna and filmed the interaction without the knowledge or consent of my very heavily pregnant staff member. Dr. Joanna then posted the video without the knowledge or consent of my staff member, and then didn't take it down when asked by my staff member, and it remains up to this day. While she didn't say anything unkind, it is still filmed and posted without consent of a very heavily pregnant woman and a very vulnerable young woman, and that is just not okay. Dr. Joanna has also repeatedly called me a pro-abortion MP, which is obviously not true. I was a member of Emily's List and I resigned after I voted against the 2019 legislation. When I joined, I made it clear that I don't support late-term abortions and was told neither do they. I didn't ask what they meant by that, and I should have, and that is on me, not on them. I'm still not sure why Dr. Joanna is telling people I'm a pro-abortion MP and a member of Emily's List.
So to deal with the first bizarre allegation that I stormed into our office and filmed a staff member without a consent. Would you describe yourself as pro-choice?
I'm conservative, so I follow my religion.
Yeah, so you're against
it.
Yeah, good on you.
Yeah. But each to their own, like everyone has their own opinion, their own circumstances. I don't know if I was in a situation where I needed to do it. If I was a kid and I was raped or something, there's always these different scenarios.
My response to that is, when there's injustice, it's not enough for me to go, I'm personally against it, but I'll let you do it. So I don't think it would be okay for me to say, I'm not going to be racist, but other people can be.
In our religion, abortion is permissible, I think, up until the heartbeat.
On Instagram, I'm Dr. Joanna Howe, if you want to see my stuff.
Oh, I started following you yesterday when I heard about this.
Oh, DM me on socials if you want to keep chatting. Bye-bye. See ya. is there some world in which the staff member didn't know she was being filmed? You know, we're in there for 5 minutes. We're all within a 1 metre circumference. There's 3 of us, only 3 of us in the office, and the guy behind me, while I'm asking questions, has a phone held up, which she glances at sometimes. Is it possible that she didn't know she was being filmed? Now, I guess theoretically it is, but I just don't know if I can be held responsible for that, given that we were pretty transparent about what we were doing in that place. The second thing Julia Finn is at pains to say is that she's not a pro-abortion MP, and how dare Joanna Howe call her a pro-abortion MP when, you know, I'm against abortion after 22 weeks. Well, Julia, so is like 99% of the country. I mean, most reasonable people, and certainly 100% of people in your electorate, are against killing babies after they're viable and healthy. But like, newsflash, that doesn't actually make you pro-life or anti-abortion. If you're cool with abortion up to 22 weeks, then that makes you pro-abortion. Only in an insane country that has lost its way so gravely like Australia, where we have abortion up to birth for any reason, could you even say that you're not pro-abortion because you're not against killing babies after viability, after 22 weeks? I mean, it just makes no sense. The third thing she says is, I wasn't kicked out of Emily's list, I resigned from Emily's list. Well, that's actually not what your staff member told me, and I have the text message to prove it. I'll flick it up on the screen. She clearly says, she says Julia Finn is very pro-life and she was kicked out of Emily's list because she voted against abortion up to birth in 2019. And you say in your speech, Jo Howe needs to do her research because I voted against abortion up to birth in 2019, therefore I must be pro-life. Well, no, in the speech where you voted against abortion up to birth, you clearly say, I'm pro-choice, which in my world makes you pro-abortion because you're pro a woman's choice to kill her baby. Point number 4, she then calls me an obnoxious bully. Now, the thing I don't get about any of these politicians, guys, is that they just don't seem to understand democracy. Like, it's not like I'm going around threatening to beat up their family, or I'm finding them in a dark alleyway and I'm like, harassing them. I'm literally going into their electorates, to their place of work, which is their electorate office, and I'm seeking to ask questions about their stance on a policy position or on a bill that's before the parliament. I mean, this is democracy. Like, I don't even get how they can be so affronted by a member of the public seeking to get answers on their position as an elected representative on a bill, And so for her to call me an obnoxious bully when I'm just literally trying to do what I should do as a active member of our community is indeed what I encourage you guys to do. I say, if you see a pro-abortion MP, get your phone out and ask them a damn question, because we sure as hell know the media is not going to do it, and we have to be the media now. But, be prepared that the Julia Finns of this world really don't like it. They don't really want to be asked questions by the pesky taxpayers who give them over $200,000 a year to sit in Parliament to represent us. And by the way, I get that it makes you feel uncomfortable when I'm asking you those questions or when other people are asking you those questions. But in reality, those interviews could be over in 30 seconds if you just answered the question, if you were prepared to justify your position on abortion. But instead, you can't do that. So you run away, you hide, you're not there when we come in, and you don't want to take meetings with us. Just because you feel uncomfortable doesn't make me a bully. It just makes you a coward and enormously fragile. Other points to raise. She gets a big bee in her bonnet that I haven't just, sat down with her for a meeting. That's what the pro-life movement has literally always done, and we've just lost dismally. Just because I'm not your nice pro-life Christian girl that you stereotypically want to put us into, like this box where, you have your faith leader consultations and you meet with the church leaders and you tell us and you listen and you play this big game of charades where you say, oh, yeah, I hear your concerns about the bill. And then you just go and vote for abortion up to birth anyway. Now, I know you didn't, Julia, but that's what your Labor colleagues typically do. You play Christian voters for fools. Just because I don't do that, and I'm not going to do that ever, and I bring a level of activism and assertiveness, and it's clearly effective because it's rattled you and it's rattled Labor, and it's clearly effective because we've managed to gut this bill of over 3/4 of its components, something that nobody thought would be possible at the start of this fight, and certainly defied the secret Labor Greens deal to ram this through in March. The fact that I and others have been able to do that through this new pro-life movement, well, you're just going to have to get with the program, because the old sitting down for a meeting and listening to your BS, it's over. Those days are over. We're not doing that anymore. The electorate is awake, and I actually feel it's my mission to awaken them even more, so that, in 2027, in March, if the Labor government, through their dirty deal with the Greens, has passed this bill, then Julia, we're going to be in your electorate. And so while we're on the topic of Julia Finn, here's just one more clip.
She can't even spell my name correctly. It's pretty simple, Julia. Similarly, I received a strange letter from Lyle Skelton of Family First threatening to preference against me or any other MP who supports the bill.
Julia, let me make one thing clear. It's not Skelton, it's Shelton. Shelton. And that's today on The Dr. Jo Show.